The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. My bad. Yeah, I had to unplug my mic and I plugged it back in. I think the software didn't pick up the mic. My fault on that one. So today's practice was the last in that second group of three we've talked about. So what it seems like the theme is going to be, I can't say that this will be what they do the remaining of training camp, but so far it's been 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. So this was the third installment of practice in the second group of 3. So they're off tomorrow. They'll come back and get after it on Thursday, Thursday. And that the expectation there is that it'll be a fully padded practice. So today's practice was shells practice. So helmets and shoulder pads, no thigh pads, no lower body pads. So not really looking to take people to the ground. But, you know, still you want to hear the thud, right? You want contact. You just don't want contact that takes anybody to the ground. You want to stay away from the lower extremities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what today's practice was all about. So yesterday was fully padded. Today was helmets and shells. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle the rest of training camp going into, remember, Thursday is the Hall of Fame game, Texans-Bears. The following week, that following Thursday, you will get preseason games, and Washington plays that Saturday. The expectation is that there will be joint practices probably Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe Thursday. Definitely, you know, Wednesday, Thursday of that week. So again, next Saturday, there is a preseason game that will feature the Washington Commanders. Like, let that sink in. We are almost a week away from this team hitting the field. Like, it's moving very rapidly, right? So kind of let all of that sink in, but they're continuing with the 3 on, 1 off methodology right now. We'll see if that continues throughout camp. But man, what a doozy today was. Today was, by all accounts, a fun day of practice. A lot of explosive plays. You're starting to see the offense kind of open it up. Jahan Dotson talked about that a little bit in his presser. So today we will chronicle practice, day 6 of training camp. We will discuss what was said at the mic. We heard from 2 players, 1 coach, as it's been customarily throughout camp. The 2 players in question today, Johnny Newton, rookie defensive tackle, 2nd-round pick, who made his debut in team drills today. So they're going through this process that they talked about having for him. They're slowly exposing him to the team drills. Today was the first day for him to actually be a part of team drills, so he was excited. But it was still on a limited basis, obviously, but it was good to hear him get out there and be a part of practice. And he was definitely excited, you could tell. We'll talk about what he had to say. A lot of his press conference was centered around his injury. So he talked for, over 5 minutes. I'd say about 4 minutes of his press conference centered around his injury, as he kept getting peppered with different questions about the injury, the recovery, things of that nature. So you really didn't get a ton out of him. But again, he hasn't practiced a lot either, so there wasn't really a lot to ask him. But we'll talk about what he had to say. Jahan Dotson, who I think this is the make or break year for him. Not that if he doesn't have a great year, his career is over or anything like that. But if he's looking to establish himself as a core piece here in Washington, especially with a new group coming in, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I think that there's a lot of potential, and I think they feel like Jahan can be a big-time receiver, but he's going to have to show it this year. So we heard from Jahan, and what he had to say. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, head coach Dan Quinn will talk about what he had to say before day 6 of training camp practice. So let's talk about the actual practice itself. It was a fun one. Listening to everybody describe what was going on, reading different, excerpts, articles, things that have been written about today's practice, sound like one that was fun to be in attendance for. And the club level members were the ones that had access to practice today. So a lot of what went on today, you can't use your cameras to shoot it. So you're not supposed to use your camera to record 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 plays, anything team drill oriented. They don't care about the individual drills. When you do indie work, everybody does indie work around the league. There's really no, you might have different drills that you put your teams through and those individual groups through, but there's no significance there. There's no competitive advantage that can be gained from watching someone go through team drill or indie drills. But they don't want the team drills up on, YouTube and social media and things of that nature. So there weren't a lot of clips about practice today, but the commentary surrounding practice was phenomenal. It's one of those days that I've told myself, these are the most dangerous days of camp. Days like today, where there's so much positivity. Jaden Daniels murdered practice. By most accounts, today was his sharpest day of practice. He was extremely accurate down the field. You're starting to see him open it up a bit. He was able to throw the ball on the run as well. Pinpoint accuracy. There was actually some video up of him and Jeff Driscoll going through a competition. Apparently, all the quarterbacks did this. Him and Jeff Driscoll made it to the finals of the competition that they were having, where their back was turned to that little throwing net that has the 3 slots diagonally going down from top to bottom. And you turn around as quickly as you can and you fire into the net, and you try to go into the little openings that are there. And they're very small, tight window openings. And we've seen Jaden Daniels just be very accurate. It's been actually mind-boggling to me how accurate he's been a lot of times on the move. And in this particular drill, your back is turned, you've turned around and you quick release. And we know he's got a lightning quick release. One of the things that I feel like separates him from a lot of the quarterbacks, not only in this year's draft class, but just around the league, is how quick his release is. And then the accuracy with that release. I mean, he turned around and he fired it into that net. He beat Jeff Driscoll in that drill. And it was a microcosm of the day because he was so accurate most of the day, but especially throwing it deep, something that we haven't heard a lot of because they've been doing a lot of red zone work. So again, you're cutting the field, not even in half, you're cutting it into essentially a fifth. When you're getting into the red zone, you're talking about those 20 yards. And a lot of times your red zone work is even closer. You're 10 yards away from the end zone. You're 5 yards away from the end zone. There's a lot of running that goes on in there. So there's not a lot of deep passes and deep shots that are being taken. You get into the 2-minute work, and again, you're not getting a lot of opportunities to push the ball vertically. You're trying to take what the defense is giving you so you can matriculate the ball down the field as quickly as possible and get in the scoring range. So they opened it up today. Jahan Dotson talked about that, and there were a lot of deep shots. Terry McLaurin had a couple of nice catches down the field. Jahan had a couple of nice catches down the field. Bryson Tremaine had a diving catch. Olamide Zaccheaus had a over-the-shoulder catch from Jaden Daniels down the field. So a number of big plays happened today which made it very fun for those in attendance to see. So in my notes, I wrote down explosive, 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 but I also wrote down dangerous, 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 because these are the days that get people excited, get fans talking about 10, 11 wins, and you have to temper those expectations. And you have to understand that today was just one day of practice. And while it was really good, there were some negatives, and I'll bring those up to kind of even things out. But a lot of positives. But just like today was a super positive day, extremely explosive in terms of, big plays down the field, something that this offense has lacked for a very long time now. And a lot of consistency with those explosive plays, that gets you excited as well. There could be a day that could be the direct opposite, where the ball's hitting the ground a ton, interceptions, the offense can't get right, the defense dominates it. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? At the end of the day, this one was a fun practice, and let's discuss what went on today. So Terry McLaurin had a big day as his connection with Jaden Daniels continues to grow. Terry had a couple of nice catches, one down the sideline, about 40 yards. Another one that he had wasn't as long, but it was another nice catch down the field. Made a couple of guys miss towards the sidelines. So, Terry's starting to get comfortable. And I talked about this yesterday, that the more reps Jaden gets with the first team offense, the more in rhythm and in sync these guys can get, the more reps they get, the more dialogue and conversation starts to happen. Terry was seen after the deep ball. He was excited. He was pumped. I heard that he got up. he was charged up. He celebrated, and then he went back to the huddle, and he and Jaden had a discussion about, the deep ball and some of the other plays. So the more Jaden is in there getting those reps, the more those conversations are going to take place. And I talked about that because Zach Ertz brought that up, how Jaden hasn't had a ton of reps with the ones. So when he does have those reps, it's important to make them count so that they can have something on film, so they can discuss what they're seeing out there, get on the same page. So I love that Jaden is starting to get, we'll talk more about that as we get deeper into this discussion, but Jaden's getting more and more of those first team reps now, as they're starting to move away from the, we got to split the reps and we got to make sure Marcus goes first so that Jaden earns it. They're getting into that portion of the process where they're starting to turn over the reins. It's not fully given to him yet. Obviously, Marcus is still getting first team reps and they're still splitting the reps, but they're starting to shift over from Marcus starts out practice with the ones to Jaden's getting a lot of those reps. Jaden's getting those reps with the in the situations, right? Situational football, those situational sets where you're in 2 minute, you're in 2 minute offense, you're in red zone, things of that nature. He's starting to get those reps. So their connection is starting to grow. Benjamin St-Juste, just real quick as an aside, Benjamin St-Juste participated in indie drills, but then was seen walking back to the building and did not return to practice. I don't want to speculate. We don't know if an injury was sustained or not. But I've already told you guys that I think Michael Davis is going to be this year's Ronald Darby, right? 2020 from, Ronald Darby from 2020. He's going to be that kind of a player for us this year. I have not backed down. I've not wavered. I'm not going to waffle on that. I think Michael Davis is going to be our most steady corner this year. May not be the most productive from taking the ball away. That could be someone else. But when we feel like, hey, they're challenging someone and they challenge Michael Davis, I think he's going to stand up to the challenge more times than not. This could be the window of opportunity he needs. If Juice is not healthy, and I hope Juice is healthy, and he went inside for a non-football related reason, or he went inside because he felt a little tightness, nothing major. He sits out because they don't have practice tomorrow, sits out, maybe the practice after tomorrow on Thursday, And then on Friday, he's back after it. I hope it's something minor. He's back out there. We need him. He needs reps. But if he's not able to go, that opens the door for Michael Davis. And we'll talk more about that because, head coach Dan Quinn talked about the cornerback, the defensive backfield in particular, but the corners and things of that nature. He talked about them during his presser. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Juice participated in indies, did not participate in team drills, went inside and did not return. So that's something to monitor. Frankie Luvu's speed continues to pop. John Keim talked about it. Nikki Javala talked about it. It's there. And I know it's there. So this is not a surprise to me. I just keep telling you guys about it because I know a lot of you didn't watch Frankie Luvu in Carolina. So you have absolutely no idea what you're getting yourself into. So I want to keep reminding you that his speed is next level. So when you see it, you're not as taken aback by it. Like, okay, Louie T kept telling me this guy was fast, and now I see it. When you see Frankie Luvu on the field, you're going to know. I don't even need to tell you what number he's wearing, although we know what number he's wearing. Just watch the game, and you'll see a guy moving faster than everybody else, and you go, oh, that's Frankie Luvu. So he's continuing to show that during practice, and he popped again today. Jahan Dotson had his best practice of training camp thus far, and this is good news because I'm looking for big things from Jahan. I'm a massive Jahan Dotson fan. I think this guy is super talented and capable of doing big things. He's a guy that I think you have to get involved early and often. I think he's a guy that needs to be, much like Terry, needs to be fed the football, right? And unlike Terry, who I think, you can force it to Terry in one-on-one situations, down the field, or you could throw it to Terry in tight window situations. I think Jahan's a guy you need to get it to in space. Whether he creates it himself by route running and separating, or you get it to him with, quick screens, hitches, things that get it in his hands quickly and allow him to operate, because I think he excels in those types of situations. He talked about that at his press conference. We'll get to that a little bit later on, but he had a deep ball catch. He also had one that he didn't catch that, he wanted back. And then he also had a nice deep comeback on the sideline that him and Jaden connected on. So Jahan, was really active in practice, got a lot of targets today, had a number of catches, and you want to see him come to life because, again, I think he's going to be one of those X factors offensively. We know what Terry is. We know what Brian Robinson Jr. is. We know what Austin Eckler can be. We know what Zach Ertz is, right? Like, if you've watched those players' careers, you kind of know what we're getting ourselves into. There's still, sort of a cloud of mystery, surrounding Jahan Dotson and what he can be. If he maximizes his skill set, this offense can take off. So it's good to hear that he had his best day of camp thus far. Talked about this earlier, but I'll reference it again. Jaden Daniels getting starter reps in situational periods, including the 2-minute where he tossed a touchdown pass to Zach Ertz after hitting a big play down the field to Terry. Head coach Dan Quinn talked about how they were going to set up practice, and they were setting up these situations where it'd be 2nd and 7, and you're down 4, like 28-24. And you need a touchdown. And there's only a certain amount of time left on the clock, and the ball's at your own 40, and you got to get into the end zone in order to win, that type of thing. So there was an explosive to Terry, and then they got in the red zone, and Ertz caught a touchdown pass as time essentially expired. He then punted the ball into the stands or whatnot. He got a flag. The officials are out there. They threw a flag for the excessive celebration, but they didn't care because they would have essentially won had it been a real game. But that's nor here nor there. It was just a fun moment. You see Jaden starting to get really comfortable with those guys on the first unit. Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. You're starting to see that because he's getting more reps with them. Jaden Daniels was fantastic today. By far and away, his best day of camp. And he's had some good ones. Day 1 of camp, he was extremely accurate. Day 2, he was really good. He's had some really good days. And this one goes at the very top because he was also pushing the ball vertically, something we had not seen up until today, pushing the ball down the field. And we had talked about that. And I talked about as they get more and more of the offense installed and they start to open up the things that they're doing, because again, when you're working red zone, you're not working as much of the field. So there's not going to be as much space for those deeper shots. Now that they're opening up the playbook, they're starting to install a little bit more. And they're working different portions of the field now. You're starting to see them open up and take shots down the field. And he was tremendous today in that regard. Let's talk about some players that I think have a chance to, make this roster. There's still long shots, some longer than others, but making plays in practice is a precursor, you hope, to then making plays in the preseason, which is ultimately going to give you a shot, right? Obviously, you got to play special teams. If you're on the back end of the roster, if you're on the bubble and you're fighting for a roster spot, you better be damn good on specials. That's going to be the first way you're going to make the team. And then you got to be able to help at whatever position you're playing. So if you're a receiver, you got to be able to come in the game and play receiver if your number's called, right? Like your first core responsibility is going to be special teams. But if you're a receiver, you better be able to play receiver if you get called, upon in a game, and you better be able to jump in there and help. If you're a running back and there's an injury, you better be able to jump in there and help at running back. But your first priority is you better be able to help on specials. Here are 3 guys that continue to, I think, make a case for themselves. Bryson Tremaine is a guy that was here last year, undrafted, out of Stanford. I really think Tavita Pritchard was the reason he got an opportunity last year. So he was already here, already on the practice squad. He offers something that we don't have a lot of. I can't stress this enough. He offers size. And when you offer size for a roster that doesn't have a lot of it, our biggest receiver is 6'2", and that's Luke McCaffrey. So when you have a guy like Bryson Tremaine that offers you some size at like 6'4", right? That's a commodity that you look at and you say, hey, we may be able to do something with that, right? So he made a diving catch. Players ran onto the field when he made that stab on an offering from Marcus Mariota. So he continues to shine, and he's a really good special teams player, is Bryson Tremaine. So he's one to look out for. I still think he's on the outside looking in, but continuing to make plays, continuing to make those splash plays, be a core special teamer. That's how you're going to weasel your way onto this roster. Jeremy McNichols is a guy that was a quiet signing towards the back end of free agency, didn't come with a lot of fanfare, guy that's a veteran. Here's the thing that I felt like gave him a chance. Adam Peters knows him. He played in San Francisco. There's a working relationship there. So I think this is a guy that now the staff doesn't necessarily know him, but the running backs coach does, in Anthony Lynn, who came from San Francisco. So there is a bit of a working relationship there. And thus, I think he has a bit of a leg up on some of the younger guys, the Austin Joneses, the other guys, the undrafted guys that are there, Michael Wiley. So McNichols has special teams return experience from his collegiate days as well at Boise. He can catch it out of the backfield. He can be physical, and he plays special teams because that's how he's been able to stick in the league, by being a special teams player as well. So I think he might have a leg up on some of these young guys. right now, the assumption is they're probably keeping 3 backs. We know the first 2, Chris Rodriguez, I think, is in the driver's seat to be the 3rd back, but I wouldn't pronounce him as the 3rd back. I think he's going to have to prove himself all over again to this staff. Remember, he got hurt, did Chris Rodriguez Jr., at the end of the season last year against the Jets. Remember, the Jets game was one of his best games. When they came back, he was playing really well in that game. He got hurt, missed the rest of the season. He picked up some weight. He was already a bigger back, gained a little bit of weight because he wasn't able to work out because of the injury that he sustained. So when he came back to OTAs, he had to cut weight. So I wouldn't pencil him in as that 3rd back just yet. I think there is some competition there, and Jeremy McNichols, I think, is his biggest competition. Now, if they go 4, Rodriguez is safe. If they're going 3, look out. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, Dan Quinn just has a relationship similar to Dante Fowler Jr. Olamide Zaccheaus, I think, there's a soft spot there for him with Dan Quinn. He calls him OZ. And he mentioned OZ by name in his press conference today. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But he made a big catch down the sideline from Jaden Daniels over the shoulder. He offers the ability to play multiple positions, as Quinn alluded to in his press conference today. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. He offers special teams ability, both as a gunner, a guy that can go down there and make a tackle, but also as a return man. He did that in college at UVA. So I think, and again, Olamide Zaccheaus played under Dan Quinn in Atlanta, broke into the league under Quinn in Atlanta. So again, there is a history between those two. Push comes to shove, if all things are equal, Olamide might get the nod, right? So it's just something to think about there. So the O-line, we've talked about this the last 3 days, and rightfully so, and it's something that we'll continue to talk about moving forward because it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. So there's been a shift in the offensive line, and I think of these last 3 days, I'm going to give you something that Dan Quinn said that I think is the most important thing he said over the last 3 days of his press conferences. We'll get to that a little bit later on, and it has to do with the offensive line. But today, running with the ones, for the 4th consecutive day, Brandon Coleman, rookie tackle, has been working with the ones at left tackle. Nick Allegretti was back at left guard after, yesterday kind of platooning in and out and getting reps at center with the second team, things of that nature. Tyler Biadasz has been a constant at center. Sam Cosmi, a constant at right guard. And then Andrew Wiley, remember he was nursing an injury over the weekend. Sunday, he didn't really practice with the team. He did the indie drills. He came back on Monday with the pads coming on. And then he was out there again today at right tackle. So that was your starting group. We're gonna come back to that. We're gonna talk about the offensive line because Dan Quinn had something to say, and I think I'm gonna expound upon that when we get there. But I just wanted to give you the starting offensive line for today's practice for the most part. Coleman, Allegretti, Biadasz, Cosmi, and Wiley. On a side note, while we're there, Ricky Stromberg got reps with the second team for the first time at center this camp. He had been working exclusively with the third team at center, and he hasn't been taking a lot of guard reps either. So interesting to see him get second team reps. Remember, Michael Dieter was taking some first team reps at guard yesterday. He was back on the second team taking guard reps. Cornelius Lucas took the left tackle reps with the second team. So Braden Daniels is taking, remember we talked about him taking guard reps only. He took tackle reps today, but with the third team, didn't look very good, I may add. But just wanted to talk about that as a side note. And obviously on that second team, if you're looking for the other tackle, Trenton Scott was playing right tackle. Cornelius Lucas was playing left tackle. So just wanted to make that known. So Mike Sainristil. So practice was really good from an offensive standpoint. A lot of explosive plays. Jaden Daniels was fantastic. Terry was in his bag. Jahan is starting to get going. You know, a lot of good things being done there. Sorry about that. However, there was some bad, okay? And, you know, these are the growing pains of training camp. Things that happen throughout the course of camp that you have to continue to clean up, right? The ball hit the ground 3 times in terms of fumbles today. You hate to see it, right? We want to avoid turnovers. We want to avoid mistakes. You want to take care of the Duke, right? Protect the Duke at all costs. Mike Sainristil forced a fumble of Brian Robinson. This happened way down the field, like 30, 40 yards down the field. Robinson breaks a big run. He thinks he's in the clear. Sainristil comes from behind, pokes the ball free. Big hustle play. The coaches, loved it. Sainristil, gets a lot of brownie points by hustling and then forcing a fumble. And a lot of times when Brian Robinson fumbles, it's usually with him fumbling with a defender that he doesn't see. When he fumbled against New England last year, he's fighting. Guy comes from behind, kind of pokes it free. A lot of times when he fumbles, it's not on contact, with the guy in front of him like it was with Antonio Gibson. It's usually he's either fighting for extra yards and somebody rips it out, or he doesn't see it. And that happened in this particular case. He didn't see Mike Sainristil coming from behind on a tremendous hustle play to poke the football free. The defense forced a fumble of Zach Ertz. Frankie Luvu kind of forced it and recovered it. So, need Ertz to take care of the rock. But, shit happens. You just want to be better about that. But again, this defense, I have to stress this. They're big on taking it away. So you shouldn't be surprised when you hear that there was an interception here or fumble forced there, because this group, they're going to look to get that ball out, right? And then Jaden Daniels fumbled a snap. So the ball was on the ground there. So there were 3 fumbles in all at practice today. Just something to keep in mind. Like, while it was a really good day, still a lot of things that they can work on, get better at. I like the development. I like the progress that's being made. I like, how they're going about the process. Now I can't wait to see, the final product, and we won't probably see a ton of it with the starters. I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see any of it with the starters, especially on the defensive side. Maybe offensively, Jaden Daniels gets out there for a possession or two in the first 2 preseason games. But if the defense doesn't get out there at all, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at all. The only reason that the offense might be getting out there is because of Jaden Daniels and wanting to get those reps. But, if they like what they see in the joint practices, they may not put him out there. He may not. I feel like it's almost imperative that you put him out there just so he can get out there for live bullets, because he won't be in a setting where he is live game. Every single session that he's in requires him to not be hit because he's a quarterback. You can't touch him. Joint practices and all. The preseason will be the only game and opportunity that he will be allowed to be hit if he's in the game before we get to week 1. And I think that is necessary. It's not like he's never played football, he's never been hit before, but the speed of the game is different. And knowing that you can be hit, that there is no gold jersey on, that you're not off limits, I think that is important that he gets some reps where the speed of the game is heightened and they're not on your team. They're not your friends and they're not going to protect you. They're coming to take your head off and you have to play and adjust accordingly. I think he needs 1 or 2 possessions of that. Bare minimum. But again, we'll see what happens with that. Johnny Newton, press conference. Again, it wasn't a lot to glean from that other than he's back, and that I can tell you, I love the way he handled his injury situation. Like, mentally, getting injured can break you down if you're not mentally tough. Because here you are, this young kid, wide-eyed, excited, probably disappointed because you felt like you were a first-round pick, but you end up being a second-round pick in the NFL draft. You get selected, you're excited, you're ready to get to work because this whole entire draft process, you've been limited and sidelined because of the foot surgery you had in January after your collegiate season. So you weren't able to do anything, which is why I think he dropped out of the first round to begin with. So now you're finally excited. You're finally healthy. The rookie OTAs are coming up in a couple of weeks and you're ready to be there and ready to perform. And you go and you check on your foot to just make sure everything's good. You get x-rays on both of them and you find out that now the other foot needs surgery. Mentally, that can break you, right? And he was like, no. I'm good. I was a little disappointed. I'm not going to front. I was shocked that because he said, I felt no pain. I didn't even know anything was wrong with my foot. The only reason we discovered something was wrong is because of the x-ray. If not for the x-ray, I would have thought I was fine because I didn't feel anything. But he was like, no. Let's do this now. Better that this happen now and get it out the way so that I don't really miss any significant time come training camp, then have this happen during training camp or at the start of the season, and now I'm missing significant time. So it was actually a blessing in disguise that they found it when they did. He immediately had surgery, and we saw the end result. He was ready for the start of camp, and they've been ramping him up. And today was his first day of practice with the team, right? He's been doing indie drills. He's been out there since day 1 of training camp, but he's been only doing individual drills. Today was the first time he got some of the team activities, the 7-on-7, the 11-on-11 type work. And he said it was fun to be out there. And from all accounts, he's explosive. He is twitchy, which is why I said he was one of the best defensive tackles and should have been a first-round pick. You guys are going to love his game. He's going to be a problem. We really got a very good group of defensive tackles. And then he talked about John Allen's impact on him. So apparently Jonathan Allen's locker is right next to his. And he said throughout the process, when he was rehabbing, when he was having to sit on the side and not be a part of the OTAs and the minis, when he was not able to be a part of the team drills, Jonathan Allen was always a voice of inspiration and a guy that kept telling him, hey, you're going to be fine. You got this. When you get out there, you're going to dominate, and just continuing to give him words of encouragement. And he really, truly appreciated that. He's like, we know how good he and Daron Payne are on the field, but they've been equally as good to me off the field. I look at them as big brothers. They've really taken me under their wing. And, that's important to note because in a dog-eat-dog sport like football, they talk about the brotherhood and all that good stuff. And while it is a brotherhood, you're still competing with guys in your room, right? Only most instances, only 2 defensive tackles are going to be on the field at one time. And now with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., I think that could change. And you could see situations where we got 3 of those dudes on the field, and not because we go to a 5-man defensive front, but because they just put 3 of their best pass rushers on the field and they all happen to be defensive tackles. But keep in mind, Jonathan Allen continues to get older. They got a decision to make with him coming up here in a bit as to whether to extend him out, keep him here, or to move on from him. Like, you're competing with a guy like Johnny Newton. You know, they didn't necessarily draft him to take your place, but that's what could ultimately happen. It's football. But for them to be like, nah, we're going to take you under our wing, show you the ropes, help you become the best version of yourself. That's professionalism at its highest, levels. And you love to see it from Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne as it pertains to Johnny Newton. So, yeah, he just talked about the recovery. He said Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm going to take it day by day. I'm not going to rush the process. I'm so glad to be back out there, but I'm going to take my time with this because I don't want any setbacks. So he said he feels great. He's like, I don't expect to be 100% as soon as I get out there, but I feel really good. And a lot of the media members like, well, shit, if that ain't 100%, I can't wait to see what it looks like, because they said he looks explosive. He's getting off the ball. And I've seen clips of him getting off the ball. And yes, it does look really good. He looks very explosive. So I can't wait to see him get out there and see what it looks like on the field. Jahan Dotson spoke to the media today as well. And he talked about a number of different topics, the first of which was playing faster and learning all the positions. He said wide receivers coach Bobby Ingram really stressed to him the importance of being able to play all of the receiver positions, because one, that's going to allow you to be, very versatile. It won't allow the defense to key in on where you are. That gives you the, opportunity to be on the field. So when they call different sets, you're not pigeonholed like, hey, we got to take him off the field here because he doesn't know, that particular position. He can play all the positions, run all the routes. And it also allows him the freedom to then be more aggressive as a route runner, right? So he talked about playing faster, and he said that just comes with the reps and experience. He's like, I'm in year 3 now. I feel really good. The game is slowing down for me, so I'm allowed to play a lot faster, and learning all the positions has helped as well. So this is year 2 of Bobby Ingram as the receivers coach. So I think that familiarity coupled with, Dotson getting more comfortable, I think is going to really allow him to shine this year. And playing in an offense where I just think the coordinator gets it, we'll talk more about that with something that Jahan said a little bit later on. But he said he talked to Emmanuel Forbes. They were on the sidelines talking at practice a couple days ago. And he was telling them that the first few days of camp are geared towards the defense, because the offense is installing the offense in small increments. So they're limited as to what they can do. The defense can be a little bit more aggressive. And so he's like, it's kind of set up for you guys to be successful. But today was a day where the offense got after the defense a bit, especially down the field. And he said the reason that you see them, pushing the ball vertically now is that they're installing more and more of the offense. They're doing different things. They're not just working on red zone as they had been for much of the earlier portions of practice. Yesterday, there was a massive, emphasis being put on the run game, and, really wanting to see physicality, because it was a full padded practice, the first of which that they had at training camp thus far. It's the only fully padded practice they've had, because today again was helmets and shells. So they really focused on the run game and pass protection and things of that nature. So you didn't really get to see those explosive plays and those attempts down the field, but you got to see it today. And he said that they're really going to start to open things up and really be more dynamic offensively, because they're implementing more and more and more of the offense as each practice passes. He talked about Jaden Daniels' ball placement, and he said it's special, and you could tell that. Remember, when Jaden was drafted, Jahan, there was a presser, way earlier in the spring, the first of which after Jaden had been drafted with Jahan, and he said, I wanted him here. He was the quarterback that I wanted all along. You rarely hear a player say that. But he's like, yo, that was the guy I wanted. And he said that his ball placement he said he and Terry were talking about Jaden's ball placement and just how exquisite it is, and how it's putting them in positions to not have to do as much other than put their hand up, the ball falls right into it, and now they can run after the catch and make plays after the ball arrives. And when you think about that and the lack of that, remember how excited we were when we thought Sam Howell was going to be, because Sam's first game against Dallas at the end of 2022, the ball placement was extraordinary, and Jahan was getting a lot of yards after catch, slants, comebacks, things. The ball was just being put in such great positions where it allowed for run after catch, and we thought that was going to be a thing that was consistent with Sam the following year. Unfortunately, Eric Bieniemy came in and it got worse. I honestly believe that we would have been better off with Scott Turner being back and Sam working in the same offense for consecutive years versus, switching the offense, bringing in Bieniemy, who was totally clueless, and having us kind of regress offensively. But that's nor here nor there. The ball placement is key to the success of a quarterback. If you're able to put the ball where it's supposed to be, like Jahan talked about, there were certain instances. It was tremendous coverage, like on the Terry deep ball today. That was 40 yards down the field. Emmanuel Forbes was in great coverage. Like, it wasn't like Forbes got cooked. There was a play earlier in camp, like day 2 of camp, where Terry caught a ball down the field on Emmanuel Forbes. And Forbes was in great coverage. It was just a better ball, right? Same thing here. Forbes wasn't in terrible coverage. He wasn't able to get his head around because he was not in phase, right? He was not close enough to be able to locate ball, but it was just a great throw. Even if he had located the ball, I'm not sure if he would have been able to get his hands on it or not. But that's the kind of accuracy that they're talking about, so that ball placement is paramount, and Jaden has it. That's probably been the thing I've been impressed with thus far. The clips that I've seen, from what people are relaying, in terms of what they're seeing, and then the little clips of him throwing the ball on the move, into the net, into those little slots. I've never seen that kind of accuracy from a quarterback here. It's been super impressive. What up, David? The 1-2 punch of B-Rob and Eck. Jahan talked about that. And earlier I alluded to Jahan talking about something from last year. And I said we talk about it when we got there. He was talking about the run game. And he talked about specifically in his rookie season how B-Rob getting the ball in his rookie season when Scott Turner was the coordinator opened up opportunities for him down the field. And we saw explosive plays with Jahan in his rookie season that we didn't see last year because he just didn't get enough opportunities. And so teams didn't have to key in on our rushing attack because we weren't throwing the football, right? We remember when we played Seattle and we started to have success in the second half because we started out that game really well. Then we went dormant for like 2 quarters, and then we had success like end of the third into the early stages of the fourth. And remember what they said? One of the players said, yeah, they kind of caught us off guard. I think it might have even been Pete Carroll, the head coach. Yeah, they kind of caught us off guard a little bit because they actually started to run the football, and we weren't ready for that. Like, you know how crazy of a quote that is? Yeah, they started to have success because they started to run the ball, and we weren't expecting that. Not like we were getting our asses handed to us, and we were down 3 scores, and we had to throw the football. We just didn't run the ball, right? And that he wasn't the only person to say that. Miami said the same thing. Like, they got some good running backs over there. When they ran the ball, they actually had some success. Like, that was the stuff that we didn't want them to do, but we didn't do it enough. So that's how you end up getting your ass beat 45-10. But he talked about how running the football is going to help the receivers. Because he's like, with Brian Robinson Jr., you're going to have to put that extra defender in the box if you want to stop him. And if you don't, he's going to eat. Same with Eckler. Like, him coming out of the backfield, we got backs that they can eat if you don't focus in on them. And in the minute you try to bring that extra safety down and be nosy to help, Now you get one-on-one, Terry can eat, Jahan can eat. And we saw that in that Giants game, that second Giants game when Jahan got loose deep on the Giants for that big play. We saw it in week 1, his very first game, when he got deep for the game winner against Jacksonville. Like, if given the opportunity, he can make some plays. He had the catch last year against New England down the field. Kind of a busted play, it looked like, but it was a big one for a touchdown. So I think running the football is really going to help everybody. The offensive line, Jaden Daniels, the receivers, everyone is better off when there's some sort of balance. And that's kind of what Jahan was alluding to. Jahan talked about Cliff Kingsbury's offense, right? And Cliff Kingsbury's offense, quick screens, getting the ball to him out in space. He feels like they're going to have a chance to be dynamic offensively because Cliff is going to put them in different situations, but it's going to be advantageous situations that match their skill sets. And you saw a lot of, I heard about a lot of that today at practice, in particular with Jahan, because he touched it a number of times in a variety of ways. And that's going to be really important for Jahan's development. Like, if Jahan is to take that next step, he's going to have to get the football, but I think they're going to have to do a better job of getting him the ball in space. And like today, for instance, there was a play. They had run a quick screen earlier in practice, and they had done it in previous practices. So it wasn't the first time that the defense had seen it. So they've been running quick screens throughout camp. They fake the quick screen. Jahan then doubles up the sideline, and Jaden hits him on a beautiful pass up the sideline for a big gain. And it's little things like that. Remember, I used to complain about how we wouldn't set shit up. I watch all of these games, all these creative offensive coordinators who set shit up. First quarter or the week before, you got a couple of quick screens. First quarter of this game, you get a quick screen. So now you're expecting, when they see this alignment and they see the guys come off the ball in that manner, it's a quick screen. So you come screaming up to stop it, and then boom, he goes right past you, and now you got to play down the sidelines. We just never, ever took advantage of stuff like that. We were awful, So to hear them doing that kind of stuff, it's fun. On extending the play, he talked about how well Jaden Daniels extends plays and how it's important as a receiver to continue to work. And I think it is very important. I think that hearing him talk about extending the play, hearing head coach Dan Quinn talk about extending the play, I think that is a testament to them understanding that in order to be really good at off script, something that I didn't think Jaden Daniels was very good at LSU, by the way. One of my knocks on him was that he didn't extend to throw, and he wasn't really good throwing the football on the move because he didn't do it enough. Them working on that religiously at practice, I think, is a great thing, because in order to really be on the same page with your quarterback as he starts to scramble and the play breaks down, you have to practice that. The reason Mahomes is so good at it, and the Chiefs are so good at it, and Josh Allen is so good at it, is because those teams rep those situations. Oh, Josh is always getting out of the pocket, so we got to work on this in practice. Patrick is always getting out of the pocket, so we got to work on this in practice. And these players have to understand that the play's never over when Mahomes is under center. The play's never over when Josh Allen is under center, because this guy's going to extend. He's going to make things happen, so don't stop moving, right? He said that DQ is doing a great job of drilling that into them and having those plays in practice where they're able to rep that. And I think that's a really good thing to hear him talk about it as well. And then Jahan talked about Terry's impact on not just the field, but on him, and how he's really fortunate to have Terry as a teammate, someone he can go to. He talked about a play where a practice today where it was over the shoulder and he didn't make the catch. And he said Terry had made a similar catch earlier in practice, and he went over to Terry and he was like, how do you make that catch look so effortless? And Terry told him it's just reps. I practice it over and over and over again until it becomes second nature. And so Terry is one of those guys that also leads by example. So you're hoping that his professionalism, his work ethic, and the things that he does rubs off on Jahan, and that they'll make a awesome 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position. All right, so now you get into what head coach Dan Quinn had to say at practice today for day number 6. And once again, I reiterate, there is no practice tomorrow. The team will be off. They'll be back at it on Thursday. And the assumption is, and there hasn't been a confirmation of this, but the assumption is they'll get back to full pads on day 7 of training camp on Thursday, but no determination has been made quite yet as to how they're going to approach that. But DQ talked about 3 different sides of the ball yesterday, 3 different sides of the ball that stood out on day 1 of padded practice, right? So he started his presser by talking about John Bates, who jumped out at him with his physicality. And I think day 6 of DQ at the press, at the podium, featured a lot of name dropping. And I always think it's important when a coach name drops a player unsolicited. It's one thing if you're asked about a player specifically. Yes, you're going to mention that player by name and you're going to talk about him because you were asked specifically about that player. When you name drop a player unsolicited, I think it is important to note. It doesn't mean that this guy's going to make the team, but it damn sure doesn't hurt when a coach has taken notice of a guy so much so that he feels compelled to mention him unsolicited. So when he mentions John Bates jumped out at him with his physicality, and again, they didn't know John Bates really, okay? So a lot of these guys that are here, unless you were a big-time player and they game plan to try to stop you, you're really not sure what these guys are doing. We know about John Bates. I talked to Logan Paulson. He said John Bates is one of the best blocking tight ends in football. We know what Bates is. He's carved out a niche for himself on his roster. John Bates is making his football team. He's the best blocking tight end that we have, and it's not close. So, we've already talked about it. If it's 3 tight ends, John Bates is one of them. And we already know who the other 2 are. If it's 4, then that's where it gets interesting. But he said Bates's physicality jumped out to him. Like, he was really good. And I told you that one of the things that people don't really think about when you think about the pads going on, you just think about the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. But the tight ends are an extension of the offensive line, so you really get to see their physicality jump out too. And he said that John Bates stood out to him. He also mentioned on the defensive side, John Allen and Dorrance Armstrong stood out to him on defense. And there was one clip that I told you guys that Brandon sent me yesterday. Shout out to Brandon once again for the clips that you sent, where Jaden had to vacate the pocket and Dorrance Armstrong tried to go outside on Brandon Coleman. He got blocked, but Jonathan Allen beat the guard on that play. And I want to say it was Dieter. Michael Dieter was playing guard with the first team yesterday, and he beat him, got inside, and he applied pressure, and Jaden had to vacate the pocket and take off. So John Allen and Dorrance Armstrong, he said, stood out defensively for him. And then on special teams, he said Kaz Allen and Mike Sainristil stood out in the returns game. Like, both of those dudes jumped in the fray and said, hey, let me get some of this action, man. What's good? So I keep bringing up Kaz Allen because I think he's the most natural return man on the team right now because he did it at UCLA and he was really good at it. And I think he's the most natural guy. And he's taken running back snaps before as a gadget player in the backfield. So I think the kickoff return rules might actually benefit Kaz Allen as well. It's, can he also help as a punt returner? Can he also help on special teams as a guy that can go down and make a tackle? These are the things that are going to help him make the football team, because he can't, I don't think he is good enough as a receiver right now, as Kaz Allen, to help his case in that regard. So he's going to have to really shine in other areas. Mike Sainristil, he said, stood out as well. And that's a bad thing if you're a guy like Kaz Allen or Olamide Zaccheaus or one of these guys who wants to use special teams as a way to help them make the roster. If they can double Mike Sainristil as a return man, then that limits the ability to need one of these other guys to be on the roster to do that, right? We're going to talk about Mike Sainristil here in a bit, because I got a little bit to say about him. And he was specifically asked about during the presser, and I'm going to use that opportunity to talk about him. John Allen's use of hands, DQ talked about. That's the thing that stood out to him the most about Jonathan Allen that he didn't know about JA, is his hand usage. And I would tell you that along with his quickness, Jonathan Allen's hand usage is his superpower. When he wins, a lot of time it's with quickness and it's with great hand usage. So I think DQ's just being exposed to that really for the first time. And he said of Jonathan Allen, you know how they say a lot of guys look good in shorts? Well, Jonathan Allen looks even better in pads. And he's like, that's a great thing. That's the highest compliment you can give a guy. And he looks really good. You know, I've been focusing a lot, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm not ashamed to admit this. I've been really big on hyping up Daron Payne and talking about what a big season he could have, and the upside with Daron Payne. But the consistency has always lied with John Allen. He's always been the more consistent of the two. I think the higher upside lies with Daron Payne, but if we're talking about consistency, a guy that you know you can rely on, it's Jonathan Allen, and it's always been Jonathan Allen, which is why he continues to get the accolades, because he's the guy that consistently puts in the work and gets, consistent results. Whereas Daron, he could be way up here or he could be way down here. Jonathan Allen's always going to be somewhere up in here, right? He may not get to up here, but he's always going to be right up in here, right? There isn't that big fluctuation with him. I think he's in a position to have a massive season too. So I wouldn't be shocked if he finally breaks through that glass ceiling and gets to double-digit sacks this year and has a ton of tackles for loss. And because we even heard Daron Payne say, man, John Allen is making a bunch of plays in camp already because they're allowing us to be explosive and get up the field. And that's John Allen's game, right? Get in the backfield, be a disruptive one-gap penetrator. That's what he's being allowed to do, and sounds like he is doing it at a very high level right now. Nick Saban had comments about Mike Sainristil during the draft that pound for pound, he was the best player in the draft. And, that stood out a lot for a lot of us as fans. But, the media jumped all over that. And I remember in the Commander's log, head coach Dan Quinn acknowledged that Nick Saban had said that. I think it might have even been Adam Peters. One of them acknowledged that Nick Saban had said that during the telecast, so they were really pumped about that. So they asked, Dan Quinn, who has ties to Nick Saban, about his comments about Mike Sainristil, and he talked about the respect he has for Nick Saban and how his words carry a lot of weight, et cetera, et cetera. But he also talked about Mike Sainristil and, just how good of a football player he is and how they've put him in a number of different situations inside in the nickel. They've blitzed him. They've put him in man-to-man situations. They've had him playing zone. They love the way that he tackles, how he attacks the football. I told you he forced a fumble today. I'm going to go out on a limb, and they're trying him on special teams. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this right now. Outside of Jaden Daniels and potentially Brandon Coleman if he's starting at left tackle. And even with that said, Mike Sainristil may be the most important rookie not named Jaden Daniels of the rookie class. Now, Again, if Brandon Coleman's starting at left tackle, he immediately goes to number 2. But Mike Sainristil is going to be relied upon, unlike the rest of the rookies who may carve out a niche for themselves. Newton isn't a starter. Sennett isn't a starter. Jordan McGee isn't a starter. Dominique Hampton has to try to make the team. He's not a starter, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you can look at the rest of the guys and see they're going to have impacts. They're going to have their roles that they carve out for themselves, but their roles won't be as big. Mike Sainristil, from the word go, is going to be relied upon as our nickel, and we need him like we need air to breathe. If anything happens to Mike Sainristil, we don't have another nickel right now, just so we're clear. We didn't have a nickel before this man showed up. We struggled in the nickel department, going all the way back to Bobby McCain getting cooked by the Giants in that second game on Sunday night, where they could do whatever they wanted because Bobby McCain was playing a nickel. And then they tried to put Quan Martin in the nickel last year, and it was, to mixed reviews. We got ourselves a true nickel corner. Do you know how important that is in today's NFL? You better have yourself a nickel or you will get cooked. If anything happens to this man, knock on a little bit of wood, we're in trouble, okay? We need Mike Sainristil to be healthy because they're going to utilize him, and he's going to be paramount to the success of this defense. I'm just telling you, okay? Almost to the point where I'm like, don't even bother putting Mike back there on kickoffs or punts and none of that shit. Like, he's too valuable, right? Find somebody else to do that. But he right now, and Dan Quinn talked about his importance. He right now is a big part of the football team. So here is the thing that DQ said that I thought was the most important thing he said over the last 3 days. We're really starting to put pieces of the puzzle of the offensive line together, right? Still a lot of work to be done. So I love the way this question was phrased by Ben Standing, because it forced Dan Quinn to acknowledge something, or it led him to, it didn't force him to do anything. He doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do. And Dan Quinn, to me, has shown his mastery of not answering a question, but still giving you an answer that you can, feel good about. But when Ben Standing asked this question, he said, seems like center and right guard are solidified. And I talked about this. I literally said this yesterday. I said, they're playing around with every other position except center and right guard. Those are the two positions where they're telling us Tyler Biadasz is our starting center, which we already knew. When they gave him a 3-year contract, we knew he was the starting center. And Sam Cosmi is our right guard, and we knew that already. Now, right tackle, left guard, they're playing musical chairs, trying to figure out what's going to be the best combination, this, that, and the third. And Dan Quinn said, I would put Nick in that group. Okay. He said, yeah, we were, moving Nick around just to make sure he could play center. We didn't want to disrupt Tyler at first team center, so we moved him to second team center. So that allowed, Michael Dieter to get some first team reps, see what he could do. But it was more about making sure Nick Allegretti could play center too in a pinch. So, if something happens on game day, we could slide Nick Allegretti over to center and we could insert somebody else at left guard, right? Probably Michael Dieter or somebody like that. And you just keep the party going, right? So, but he's like, no, Nick's a part of that group. So essentially what he's telling you is, we just got to figure out the 2 tackle spots. And while he's probably going to be your starting right tackle, but he's like, from guard to guard, it's solidified. Nick Allegretti is our starting left guard. Tyler Biadasz is our starting center. And Sam Cosmi is our starting right guard. And essentially today, Dan Quinn said, those are our starters on the interior. He has not said that before. So really, you're just trying to figure out who your 2 tackles are. And I want to go ahead and talk about that right now, because there's been a shift in the thought process for me, at least. 4 days in a row of Brandon Coleman is not an accident. Okay. They're starting to get to a point now where they're liking what they see. The pads have come on to a degree. Obviously, it wasn't fully padded today, but there were shells and helmets, right? And yesterday was a fully padded practice, and I expect the practice on Thursday to be fully padded. But 4 days in a row of Brandon Coleman running with the ones. There's no injuries. There's no reason, that he's getting these reps. They like what they're seeing from him. They want him to win this job. They're not going to give it to him, but they drafted him to win this job. And right now, he's showing them enough to where they feel comfortable with him being out there. So what I'm telling you is the shift is starting to take place, because I was adamant Cornelius Lucas was going to start. And he may still very well be the starter when we get to week 1. But it felt really slanted towards Cornelius Lucas at the beginning. It's now shifted to Brandon Coleman being the starting left tackle. And it's starting to look like Coleman, Allegretti, Biotish, Cosme, and Wiley will be your starting 5. That's what it's shifting towards. 4 days of Coleman in a row is not an accident, including the first fully padded practice and the first shells and helmet practice with Coleman heading up the ones at left tackle. I don't think that's an accident. I do not think that's an accident. So Nick being a part of a group that has been solidified at center and guard tells me that they feel like Nick Allegretti is their starting left guard. So I thought that was a pretty profound statement by Dan Quinn. Quinn was asked about how the rookies have assimilated and how they've come along, and he said he could see that they were tight early. A lot of the rookies didn't want to make mistakes. He said so they weren't playing as fast, but he told them, I'd much rather you play fast, make a mistake, and then we can coach off of that instead of the opposite. So he said what he's seen from them is they're not making a ton of mistakes. The rookies are. They're smart. They're in their playbooks. They get it. Now it's just about getting them to just play fast, right? Forget about making mistakes, right? Go out and play fast. And he said he's loved what he's seen from them as time has gone on. He talked about the importance of having Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn as assistants on his staff because those guys have head coaching experience. He talks about, seeing around the corner, guys that can help you see some of your blind spots. Having ex-head coaches who have sat in the seat matters to him. He talked about that, and he talked about how he really appreciates both of those guys being on his staff. He talked about Emmanuel Forbes and his confidence. He said that it is important to have confidence on the freeway. He talked about Roger Federer and, him talking about how, he won 80% of his matches, but like 50-something% of the 80% in those wins, he didn't win, on points. And, so essentially he had to overcome adversity, wipe, a situation that may not have gone well for him from the memory bank and get it done. So he talked about essentially you're not always going to win the battle, but you need to be able to win the war. Essentially, they're going to be individual battles within the war, and you're not going to win all of them. But if you're mentally tough enough, you'll be able to bounce back, and eventually, you win enough battles, you'll win the war, right? He talked about Dyami Brown, and this is another name drop, just like he dropped Nick Allegretti's name, just like he dropped Kaz Allen and Mike Sainristil's name, like he dropped John Allen and Dorrance Armstrong's name and John Bates's name. He name dropped Dyami Brown when Dyami Brown was not asked about. It was unsolicited. They were asking about secondary reaction plays and Jaden Daniels getting out of the pocket. And he said, who's been really impressive in that? Dyami Brown. his speed, his ability to stay alive. And you know what play that made me think of from last year? The touchdown against Seattle, right? Where Sam was in the pocket for like 20 seconds. It was one of the few times last year he was actually protected, stood back there forever and ever and ever. And Diami kind of uncovered, got into a little bit of a zone, a little hole in the defense, made himself available, climbed the ladder, went up and got, and hauled ass for a touchdown. And Dan Quinn said he's loving Diami Brown's ability to stay alive on plays, use that speed to uncover and be a target for his quarterback. Diami's making his team. I'm just telling you right now. So many of you guys want to put Diami in a compromising spot. Diami's here. Diami's a core special teamer. Diami's getting reps. Diami's a guy that there's no reason to cut him on the last year of his rookie deal. It just doesn't make any sense. Again, there aren't enough talented guys behind him on the roster to cut him. It'd be different if you drafted a guy in the 7th round or there was some undrafted guy that you really loved that is really making plays. Have you heard about Rosamie St. Jack or Jack Saint? Have you heard anything about his ass? Because I haven't, right? Like, there's nobody pushing Diami out of the mix. I feel pretty safe to say that there's 4 receivers here, and if they're keeping 6, which I think that is the number, Diami's a part of the group of 4 that I feel like is rock solid and safe. Terry, Jahan, Luke, and Diami, safe. You can go wherever you want after that. Dan Quinn was asked about the defensive backs. And just like he was asked about the receivers and Diami's name came up. He was asked about the defensive backs, and he talked about the outside corners. And he said you break it up in different sections. You start with the outside corners. We've had 3 guys kind of rotating in there. Juice, Forbes, and Davis. Juice went into the locker room today. Hopefully nothing is wrong there. But I keep talking about Davis. I'm high on Davis. I think he's going to be really good this year. But he talked about those 3 rotating in defensively on the outside. Nickel, he said Mike Sainristil has separated himself. He's our nickel. We love him. He's doing big things for us, which is why I keep harping on that this dude is super important. He's going to be one of the most important rookies that we have this year. And then he talked about safety, and he said he was talking to Joe the other day. He's talking about Joe Witt Jr. And he said, I was talking to Joe the other day, and he said, I told him Quan might be the best tackler in our secondary. We just love the fact that he's the last line of defense. This guy has the range, and he seems to be able to get guys on the ground, and he's a sure tackler, and we feel really confident about what he's going to be able to do back there. So, again, another name drop of Quan Martin, unsolicited. You love to hear it, right? Quinn talked about valuing players who have played other positions. Here's another name drop. He name dropped OZ, Olamide Zaccheaus, talked about him starting his career as a running back, then making the transition to wide receiver. This was brought up because Luke McCaffrey used to be a quarterback, and now he's a wide receiver. And Mike Sainristil used to be a wide receiver, now he's a defensive back, and those guys are players that they really like. And so, Quinn said, I wouldn't say that I value that more, but I do value guys that can play multiple positions because it allows that flexibility that you're looking for on the roster when, something happens. If you've got a receiver that can take running back snaps, that's a good thing, right? So, again, I keep talking about Olamide Zaccheaus. I think he could be, and again, I can't wait to see the preseason because that's going to help go a long way in determining, because when the lights come on, we can sit here and talk about practice all day, and that's a big part of it. But I feel like practices are like quizzes, but the preseason games for a lot of these guys are going to be the test/exam. Like, that's going to be the biggest part of your grade. Practice is huge, and it's in those quizzes, those count, and you get a lot of those. There are more quizzes than there are tests and exams, right? So you need to do well on those quizzes, but nothing counts more towards your final grade than the tests and the exams, and those are the preseason games. So we'll see what those guys do when they get those opportunities. And then finally, on Jaden Daniels extending plays. He talked about, wanting that to be a part of his game. And that's, that's music to my ears. Yesterday, I even said, I don't want them, or 2 days ago when Jaden was at the podium, I said, I don't want them doing what I felt like Eric Bieniemy and company did to Sam last year, which is talked him out of his game. Like, don't be aggressive, don't extend plays, get rid of the football, don't take sacks. And we saw him become robotic and then even make more mistakes trying to be perfect. And I just want them to let him play, right? And he said, what we're going to make sure we do is we're going to make sure we get with the Nationals and teach this guy how to slide to make sure he can protect himself. And that's important. We don't want him taking hits. I don't want him waiting to the last minute to slide, because you got dum-dums out there that'll still hit you, and that's how you get concussions. If there's 10 yards that can be gained, but getting 9 might get you hit, get 7 and get down, okay? Especially if it's first or second down. We can work with 2nd and 3, 3rd and 2, whatever. Your health is more important. Run out of bounds, slide, do the things necessary to keep yourself healthy. I do think that is important as well. And he talked about Jaden extending plays to throw. He's like, what we want from him the most and what we look for, the guys that are the most dangerous in the NFL are the ones that extend to throw, not extending to run all the time. That's easy to defend. You want guys that are extending to throw the football, and that's what we're working on with Jaden Daniels. So, all right. That was day 6 in a nutshell. Let's get to the comment section, see what you guys have to say before we get out of here. Command the field. Stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. You know what to do. Show Command the Field some love. Welcome Command the Field with open arms. Show them what it's like to be a member of the MOBB. Command the Field. Welcome to the squad. Glad to have you. Jern, thank you for being a member for 28 months. Who writes, man, I can't wait to see this team in action soon. You don't have to wait very long. Like next week, joint practices with is it the Dolphins or the Jets? Let me see who our first preseason game is against. Next week, joint practices with the Jets, and then we play them on Saturday, next Saturday. So like I'm telling y'all, it's going to be here faster than you think. So I know it feels like, like, oh man, we just got to camp, and we did, but this thing moves rapidly, right? So this you'll be seeing the fellas on the field, and it's always a sight for sore eyes when we see the fellas on the field. Redsican IB, been a member for 33 months, getting close to that 3-year mark. Really, truly appreciate you. Redsican writes, what you mean we have a game next week? Looking forward to seeing these games. There's going to be a lot of interesting position battles going on, and there will be, especially back into the roster. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at defensive tackle, what's happening at safety, what's happening at corner, what's happening at wide receiver, what's happening at running back. Hell, what's happening at tight end? I just named damn near all of the positions. It's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out. And yes, there is a game next Saturday, right? I know that sounds crazy, but there's a game next Saturday. Got any grapes? Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Got any grapes? Writes, Lou was out there today, and our boy Mikey was all over the field. Autographed a ball for my son. Luke was out there getting active today. Telling you, those young guys are going to be instrumental in the success of the team this year. But Mike Sainristil is going to be one of the most important players on the roster this season. Veteran or rookie, but specifically with that rookie class, after Jaden Daniels and potentially Brandon Coleman, if he's the starting left tackle. And I still think his importance is going to be massive, because even if Coleman can't go, Cornelius Lucas can play left tackle. We don't have a replacement for Mike Sainristil at nickel. He's that important to our success. So I think he is paramount. So I'm looking forward to seeing that young fella play. I told y'all how much of a crush I had on him when I would talk about the college football season and Michigan. I told you I love me some Mike Sainristil. I'm so happy he's on our team. He's such a good football player. Ethan Dykes, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. Hey, right, yo, Lou, been a minute. It has been. He said, life's been crazy. Life is definitely crazy, but you're navigating it. You're here, and I appreciate you. Says, finally got my own place. Congratulations, bro. That's, man, that's a huge accomplishment. Big milestone. A lot of people don't understand how big of a deal that is. Just like the Commanders this year, I'm recalibrating. LOL. Gonna be a fun year, man. Indeed, it will be. Bart Scott. Can't wait. Love the recalibration. Love to see it, man. Continue to grow personally. That's a big step, getting your own place, man. I love to hear it, man. Congratulations. Good to hear from you. Hey! Dylan Diamond, thank you for becoming the newest member. Stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. Y'all know what to do. Show Dylan some love. Welcome him with open arms. Double D, welcome to the squad. Glad to have you, Dylan Diamond. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on day 6 of Training Camp Confidential with the Washington Commanders. No practice tomorrow. The fellas have the day off. They'll get back after it for day 7 of training camp on Thursday, where the expectation is that they will be in full pads. We'll see what happens, but looking forward to seeing what happens there. We will be live tomorrow night, I believe, being that there's a game on Thursday, which is going to suck, but it's just a acknowledgement that football is back. We'll probably be live Wednesday night to talk about this team. So there will still be content surrounding the Commanders, and we'll talk about what we've seen from the first 6 days of training camp and what we expect to see from, the next 6, days of camp into joint practices and ultimately into the first preseason game versus the New York Jets next Saturday. So lots to get to. We'll discuss that tomorrow night. Look forward to chopping it up with you. If you haven't had a chance, check out the Super Friends stream we had last night. It was a lot of fun. So go over there, check out the NFC East Super Friends channel. Like that, subscribe to that channel, all that good stuff. But in any event, I'll be live tonight with a podcast episode. I'll also be talking about the LTN exclusives here coming up probably tomorrow. I'll do that. So stay locked in to the Louie T Network. Tons going on here on the channel. Looking forward to chopping up with you. It's football season. We're back. I love it. Y'all know what it is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.